Welcome back, listeners. We're taking another deep dive today.
Oh, this is going to be a good one.
This time, it's into a place that's not exactly known for its open-door policy.
Right. Very much the opposite.
Yeah, we're talking about North Korea.
Yeah.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. North Korea, technology.
Probably not the first thing that comes to mind.
Exactly. But that's why we're doing this deep dive, right? Because there's a whole lot more going on than just the headlines about,
Missiles.
Yeah, missiles and hacking, all that.
Cyber warfare.
Exactly.
There's a whole other side to their tech scene, and it's actually pretty surprising.
It is. And today, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna dig into how advanced their technology really is.
What their goals are.
Right. What their goals are.
Yeah.
What it all means for, the rest of the world. I mean, think about it. Juche steel. Have you heard of that?
UG Steel. Yeah, it's fascinating.
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel, right?
It really does.
And then there's this carbon nanochemical industry.
Now, that's ambitious.
Ambitious is an understatement. So yeah, we're going to unpack all of that and more.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so let's start with the basics. When we think about North Korean technology, I think, at least for me, the first thing that pops into my head is, their military stuff.
Yeah, it's the most visible, for sure. The missiles, the nuclear program, all that. But it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. So beyond the military applications, what else is happening? I mean, where else are they trying to innovate?
Well, you have to understand their economic system. It's all about self-reliance. Juche, they call it.
Okay, Juche.
Yeah.
So how does that actually play out in their approach to tech?
Well, it means they're pretty much forced to innovate, right? They're under heavy sanctions. They can't easily import what they need.
So they have to figure it out themselves.
Exactly. So they've been focusing on developing a whole range of technologies, often with the goal of becoming less reliant on the outside world.
That makes sense. It's almost like necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Absolutely. And it's fascinating to see how they're applying this Juche idea to different industries.
So who's really driving this push for tech in North Korea? I mean, is it private companies like we see in a lot of other countries?
Not quite. It's the government that's really calling the shots here. They set the priorities, they allocate resources, they decide which industries to focus on.
So it's a very top-down approach.
Very much so. And it's all guided by the vision of,
Kim Jong-un?
Kim Jong-un, exactly. He's placed a huge emphasis on science and technology, sees it as key to national strength.
It's like he's trying to fast-forward their progress.
Yeah, catch up is the word he uses.
Right, catch up. I remember reading about his instant catch-up doctrine and all those slogans about leaping forward through science and technology. It's quite a contrast to the image we often have of North Korea.
It is. And, he's even launched these 5-year plans specifically for science and technology development.
Wow, so they're really putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak.
Absolutely. They're investing heavily in research facilities, universities, training programs. They're even pushing for, get this, nationwide scientific literacy.
No way, really? Like everyone learning about science?
Well, they have this initiative called Janmen Gwahak Jizu Injahua.
Try saying that 3 times fast.
Right. But yeah, the goal is basically to give every citizen a college-level understanding of science.
I mean, that's pretty ambitious, right? To have like a whole population that's scientifically literate.
Ambitious, definitely. Whether they can actually achieve it is another question.
Right. And it makes you wonder, with all the limitations they face, how are they actually making any progress in these areas? I mean, it's not like they have easy access to the global research community, right?
No, they don't. But they do have some impressive research institutions. Kim Il-sung University, Kim Chaek University of Technology. Those are their flagships.
Okay, and are these like world-class institutions?
Well, it's hard to say for sure because access is so limited, but they do seem to be putting a lot of resources into them.
And how about the scientists themselves? I mean, what's life like for a scientist in North Korea?
From what we know, it's a mixed bag. They're definitely given preferential treatment, special housing, better access to goods, even dedicated resorts. Can you believe it?
Dedicated resorts for scientists? That's pretty wild.
Right. But at the same time, they're also under a lot of pressure to deliver results, to come up with innovations that can help the country achieve its goals.
So it's like a high-pressure, high-reward kind of situation.
Exactly. And you have to remember, all of this is happening within a very closed system. Limited access to information, strict control over research activities. It's definitely not your typical research environment.
No, it's not. So given all these challenges, where are they actually focusing their efforts? I mean, what specific areas are they trying to excel in?
Well, they've identified 6 key industries that they see as crucial for their self-reliance.
Okay, and what are those?
Power, coal, metals, chemicals, machinery, and get this, information technology.
Hold on, information technology. That seems surprising given how restricted their internet access is.
Yeah, we'll get into that later because it's a whole other rabbit hole.
I bet. Okay, so let's start with power. I know North Korea has struggled with energy shortages for years. How are they trying to address that? Just building more power plants?
It's not that simple. They are building new power plants, but they're also exploring alternative energy sources and putting a lot of emphasis on energy efficiency.
Makes sense. So what kind of alternative sources are they looking at?
Well, Kim Jong-un has shown a particular interest in renewable energy, solar power especially. You'll see solar panels popping up all over the place now.
So going green, in a way?
In a way, yeah. But coal is still king, at least for now. They have a lot of it, and it's essential for their power plants and heavy industries.
Speaking of heavy industries, you mentioned metals earlier.
Yeah.
I know they're trying to produce their own steel, right?
Yeah.
What's the story with that?
Yeah, their goal is to become self-sufficient in steel production, using local resources and technology.
Juche steel.
Juche steel, that's it. And it's a big challenge because they lack coke, which is a key ingredient in traditional steelmaking.
So how are they getting around that?
They've been focusing on a different method called smelting reduction.
Smelting reduction, okay. And what's the advantage of that?
Well, for one, it's less energy intensive and it doesn't require coke. They're even developing advanced oxygen heat furnaces to make the process more efficient.
Wow, so really pushing the boundaries there. It's amazing how these limitations are forcing them to innovate.
It really is. And that innovation extends to their chemical industry as well.
Okay, now that one really surprises me. How can they have a thriving chemical industry when they're so cut off from global supply chains?
Well, they've adapted. Instead of relying on petroleum, which is scarce for them, they've turned to anthracite.
Anthracite, that's a type of coal, right?
Exactly. And they have tons of it, so they've developed this whole system for producing chemicals from coal.
That's fascinating. So what kind of chemicals are they making with this method?
Everything from plastics and fertilizers to synthetic fibers. They even have this ambitious project called the Carbon Hana Chemical Industry.
Carbon Hana, what a name.
Right. It's basically their grand vision for a coal-based chemical industry.
I mean, that's a pretty bold move, right? Trying to build a whole sector around a single resource.
Very bold. But it shows how they're thinking outside the box, trying to find ways to work around their limitations.
So from coal-powered chemicals to juche steel, it seems like they're really trying to make the most of what they have.
They are. And it's not just about chemicals and steel. Their machinery industries are also playing a crucial role in their drive for self-reliance.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, they can't exactly import heavy equipment due to the sanctions, right?
Exactly. So they've been focusing on developing their own CNC machine tools, incorporating automation technologies.
CNC, that's computerized numerical control, right?
Dude, you got it. It's all about increasing efficiency and precision in manufacturing.
So they're not just making do, they're actually trying to push the boundaries in these areas.
They are. And this focus on domestic production, it extends even to their information technology sector.
Wait, hold on. You mentioned information technology earlier. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. How can they have a digital economy when their internet access is so limited?
Well, that's where things get really interesting because they've created their own version of the internet, their own intranet.
Their own internet? Seriously?
Seriously. They call it Gwangyongmeng, and it's a whole world unto itself.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What do people actually do on this North Korean internet?
Well, we'll get into the details after a quick break, but let me just say, it's more advanced than you might think.
All right, listeners, we're going to take a quick pause, but we'll be right back to dive into the mysteries of North Korea's digital world. Stay tuned. Okay, so we're back and ready to delve into this North Korean internet, this Gwangyongmeng you called it.
Gwangyongmeng.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine, you know? Like, what are they doing over there? Are they just, like, emailing each other?
It's actually more than just email. They have their own websites, their own social media platforms, even their own search engines.
Really? So like a whole parallel digital universe?
In a way, yeah. And it's all built on their own technology, their own software.
Huh. That's impressive. But how do they even access this intranet? I mean, they don't have widespread computer ownership, do they?
That's where the smartphones come in.
Smartphones. Wait, they have smartphones in North Korea?
They do. They've been developing their own domestic brands for a few years now.
Like what? Like knockoff iPhones or something?
Not exactly knockoffs. They actually run on modified Android operating systems.
Android. Wow, that's more advanced than I would have guessed.
Yeah, it's pretty sophisticated stuff. And these phones, they're designed specifically to work with their intranet.
Okay, so they have these smartphones, they have this intranet. But what are people actually using them for?
Well, they have apps for everything. Online shopping, mobile banking, news, entertainment, even education.
So like they can order groceries online, watch movies?
Yep, pretty much. They have apps for all of that. They even have their own version of Netflix called Shilly.
Shilly, huh? What a name.
It means trying in Korean, apparently.
That's interesting. So it's like they're trying to create this whole self-contained digital ecosystem.
Exactly. A digital world that's separate from the rest of the internet, controlled by the government.
Yeah, that control aspect is kind of hard to ignore, isn't it?
Definitely. The government has a very tight grip on what information is allowed on the internet. It's heavily censored, of course.
Right. So no Facebook or YouTube, I'm guessing.
Nope. Everything is homegrown. And they're very selective about what they allow from the outside world.
So it's almost like a digital version of their physical borders, right? Very tightly controlled.
You could say that. It's a fascinating example of how technology can be used to both connect and isolate people.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes you think, okay, so they have this intranet, they have these smartphones, but who's actually developing all this technology? I mean, are there like North Korean tech companies like Google or Apple?
It's not quite like that. Remember, it's a very top-down system. The government sets the priorities, and they have their own research institutions and universities working on these projects.
Right. But are there any individuals, like programmers or entrepreneurs who are kind of pushing the boundaries?
There is a growing class of tech-savvy North Koreans, that's for sure. And there's this interesting phenomenon called the Donju.
The Donju? What's that?
They're essentially North Korea's new rich, entrepreneurs who've made money in the somewhat gray areas of the economy.
Ah, so like the black market.
Not necessarily black market, but definitely operating outside the traditional state-controlled system.
Okay, so these Donjus, they're getting involved in technology.
Yeah, they're investing in it, they're hiring programmers, they're even launching their own tech ventures.
So it's like a little bit of Silicon Valley spirit creeping into North Korea.
In a way, yeah. It's a fascinating mix of old and new, top-down control and a little bit of individual initiative.
It's really a unique situation. And it makes me wonder, with all this emphasis on technology, are they actually making any progress? I mean, are they catching up to the rest of the world like Kim Jong-un wants them to?
It's hard to say for sure because we only have limited information.
Right.
But there are definitely signs of progress. Their software development skills seem to be improving. They're participating in international programming competitions, even won some awards.
No way, really?
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And they're clearly putting a lot of resources into developing their IT sector.
So, I'm starting to see a pattern here, whether it's energy or steel or chemicals or even IT. They're taking this approach of self-reliance, of figuring things out for themselves.
Exactly. And while it's definitely born out of necessity, out of sanctions and isolation, it's also leading to some pretty interesting innovations.
It is. And I'm curious to see where it all leads. I mean, can they actually achieve true technological independence? Or will they eventually hit a ceiling? Because they're so cut off from the rest of the world.
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's a question with some pretty big implications, not just for North Korea, but for the whole global landscape.
Exactly. So let's dive into that. Let's talk about the broader implications of North Korea's tech ambitions. What are the potential consequences for them, for the region, for the world? We'll explore that right after this.
Okay, so we've talked about the what, we've talked about the how, but now I think it's time to get into the why.
Right, the big picture.
Yeah, like what's the end game here? What are the potential consequences of all this technological development that's happening in North Korea?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the biggest questions is, can they actually achieve this dream of technological independence, this juche ideal? Can it really work in the long run?
It's a good question because on the one hand, they've shown that they can be incredibly resourceful, finding workarounds, adapting to limitations.
Right. They've had to be.
But on the other hand, technology is so globalized these days, it's hard to imagine any country being truly self-sufficient, especially one that's as isolated as North Korea.
Yeah, and that's the dilemma they face. They're pushing for self-reliance, but at the same time, they can't completely ignore the global tech landscape.
So it's like they're trying to walk this tightrope between isolation and engagement.
Exactly. And it's a tightrope that's getting even harder to walk as technology advances at such a rapid pace.
Right, because the more advanced technology becomes, the more interconnected it gets.
Exactly. So even if they manage to develop certain technologies domestically, they'll still need access to global supply chains, to expertise, to information if they want to keep pushing the boundaries.
So you're saying that even with all this emphasis on juche, on going it alone, they're still going to need to engage with the outside world to some extent.
I think it's inevitable, yeah. The question is, how will that engagement look? Will it be on their terms, or will they have to make concessions? And how will it impact their internal control, their ideology?
Oh, so lots of questions there.
Yeah, and those questions have implications not just for North Korea, but for the region and potentially even for the global balance of power.
Okay, so let's talk about those implications. I mean, when we think about the potential consequences of North Korea's tech ambitions, I think the first thing that comes to mind for a lot of people is, the military stuff.
Right, the fear that these technologies could be used for malicious purposes, for developing even more advanced weapon systems.
Yeah, and that's definitely a valid concern.
It is, but I think it's also important to consider the economic implications,
Right, the economic side of things.
Because if North Korea does manage to achieve a certain level of technological self-sufficiency, it could have some pretty significant ripple effects on global markets.
You mean like they could become a competitor?
Potentially, yeah. Imagine if they were able to produce and export certain technologies or key resources at a competitive price.
So it's like they're not just a threat in a military sense, but they could also become a disruptive force in the global economy.
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of countries are starting to pay attention to.
And then there's the regional aspect, right?
Yeah.
I mean, North Korea's not operating in a vacuum. They have neighbors, they have relationships or lack thereof with other countries in the region.
Right, and their technological development could have an impact on those relationships as well.
In what way?
Well, for one, it could create new opportunities for cooperation, for trade. If North Korea has something that other countries in the region need, it could lead to a thawing of relations, to more economic integration.
So instead of being a source of tension, technology could actually become a bridge between North Korea and its neighbors.
It's possible, yeah. Of course, that would depend a lot on the political climate, on North Korea's willingness to engage in a more open way.
Right, right. But it's an interesting thought that technology could actually be a force for positive change in the region.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. So I guess, when we look at the big picture, the potential consequences of North Korea's tech ambitions, it's not a simple story. There are a lot of different factors at play, a lot of possibilities, both positive and negative.
Exactly. And I think the key takeaway here is that we need to move beyond the simplistic narratives, the hermit kingdom narrative or
Right.
the rogue state narrative.
Right, it's more nuanced than that.
Much more nuanced. North Korea is a complex country with a complex history, and their approach to technology is a reflection of that complexity.
And understanding that complexity is crucial if we want to accurately assess the risks and the opportunities that their tech ambitions present.
Absolutely, because technology, it's not just about gadgets and algorithms. It's about power, it's about control, it's about the future.
Well said. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from Juche steel to the Suji economy. We've really gotten a glimpse into the inner workings of North Korea's tech scene.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey.
It has. And it's a journey that's still unfolding, right? I mean, we don't have all the answers, but I think we've gained a better understanding of the challenges, the opportunities, and the potential consequences of North Korea's pursuit of technological power.
I agree. And I think the most important thing is to stay curious, to keep asking questions, to keep trying to understand this complex and often enigmatic country.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. So, to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into North Korea's tech scene. Keep those minds curious and stay tuned for our next exploration into the world of technology.